work towards a longer term vision of growing and bringing back and keeping our rural students in our communities. And what I want to do today is to go through our upcoming conversations and about things that we want in order to be able to make robust, informed decisions. And we'll get into the discussion. We'll get into that some more. Jamie and I had a chance to chat this morning. I think she's going to be dropping into the chat. I tried to put some notes together for today. We specifically had talked about a survey for directors of schools, superintendents, and for county mayors. So I wanted to be able to let us start looking at that and figure out a timeline, because I think that will help inform our conversation. And also really want to I'm not going to drive the conversation. This is more of a recap, but the resources that we want, like 3 to 5 rural communities that are doing this, doing it well, and measuring the outcomes. So with that, let's just move to the next slide. And I'm not going to read it to you, but for the sake of this meeting and because of BEP, we just need to make sure that every meeting we have, we review the statement. It's an opportunity to revisit BEP, but this isn't about BEP. This is about us really exploring what it looks like to do something new, different, robust. Any recommendations that we have that come out of this committee, we'll all sign off on those, and then those will go to the steering committee. Not all recommendations will be used, but we will certainly, as a group, flesh those out and go through the department and send them to the subcommittee. And Jamie, if I've shortchanged that statement, let me know, because I know that's something we need to do every meeting.
It is. So I will have to read it. And just
okay, sorry.
No, that's completely fine. So it is something that, we are required to at least verbally launch our meeting. But let me kind of back up just a moment and let you all know, I'm sorry I was not with you last week. Chelsea had to step in. We were double booked last week. And so we had to divide and conquer. I'm Jamie Corwin. I'm your facilitator from the Department of Ed. And it's a great pleasure to be with you all. See a lot of familiar faces and some new ones as well. I'm the one behind your emails right now. And so anytime you need technical assistance or you need a link or any of that kind of stuff, don't ever hesitate to reach out. I'll be more than happy to help you out any way that I can. I did want to let you know before we really launch into discussion and get digging, do want to take care of not only the statement, which I'll do in just a moment, but a couple of housekeeping things off the top. In your calendar invite, there are a couple of different links. The first link in the invite will always take you to the parent folder that has every subcommittee and their materials. So once you start getting a batch of data that will be put into your subcommittee's specific meeting folder, that will be a place that you will be able to find other data batches if you're really that interested. But that will also be a place for you to kind of go if you're looking at different subcommittee information. However, yours will always be your subcommittee, and it's organized by meetings. If you're just wanting to go to this specific meeting, it is the second link in your calendar invite. So you're going to be getting a reminder email from me, right before, sort of like you did earlier. You will also get a follow-up email from me. You'll even get one, if there's ever an update or anything like that. Just look for emails in your inbox from me. They're likely subcommittee, except for Jerry Boyd. He gets a few more from me. So anyway, that's the Google Drive. It is in the chat for you. The other thing I wanted to let you know is there is a place if you ever happen to miss a meeting, because so I do 4 subcommittees, and today I've received an awful lot of emails like, hey, I missed yesterday's meeting. How do I catch up? If you go to the link that I put into the chat, it takes you to the funding formula webpage for the department. If you click on your subcommittee, there's a drop-down menu, and it will give you both the materials, the presentation, along with the recording. So all recordings are housed on YouTube, and you can click on it and you can watch it. And you can see kind of what happened through the meeting, and then we try to wrap up with some next steps as well. So even if you need to make sure you watch that end part just to kind of see where the next meeting's going. Feel free to reach out. Janet can give you a little leg up before you join the next meeting if you happen to miss, or I can. But watching that recording is likely the best way for you to sync back in. So other than that, Google Drive, recordings. So my role at the end of every meeting will be to kind of codify all of the information and then consider what are the things that seem to bubble to the surface. One of the things that you all will be doing as a subcommittee is you'll be developing formal recommendations. Those recommendations will go through this committee. They will be approved by Janet. Then I will send them on to the steering committee, which at that point, then they are part of a larger group of formal recommendations. Now, most teams this week have not really gotten to the formal recommendation stage. They just don't feel like they have their teeth sunk in deep enough at this point. Maybe they don't have enough information. Still really brainstorming. That's one of the things we're really going to do today. So don't feel panicked if you don't have formal recommendations today. It's completely fine. Those recommendations are categorized 4 chunks: a must-have, a should-have, a could-have, and a long shot. So once those ideas of what you all really feel like you believe at your core belongs in a funding formula, then this team will then sort them into one of those 4 buckets. And then those will actually be the recommendations that pass through this committee, go through Janet for final approval, then go up to the steering committee. So my job at the end of every meeting is to pull those out, and I'll be typing while you all are talking, ask whether or not this is a formal recommendation. And by the way, during your conversation, please make sure if it is one, you say, hey, Jamie, formal recommendation. And then if you give me a thumbs up, those are great, then we're good to go. Or you can help wordsmith at that moment if we really need to change it, if there's a little something different here or there. And then, of course, those will be read aloud to you, and then we'll wrap the meeting like that. So any questions about housekeeping, technology, my role on this committee? Okay. I will also be taking attendance. And so if you happen to ever call in on a phone, shoot something in the chat that says, hey, I'm here, so that I can actually record it, because sometimes it just shows a phone number. So anyway, thank you all very much for your commitment and dedication to this process. And I'm really very thankful to be with you and glad to support you in any way that I can. All right, Janet, I'm going to read the statement. I'm going to turn it right back over to you. I can do this one quickly.
Jamie, I thought I could just let everybody read it, so I'll do it.
No, that's completely fine. So the Tennessee Department of Education is excited to work with you on this opportunity to discuss the state's formula for funding public education. Before we begin, the department would like to remind you of the following. Conversations on this topic are not intended to reflect on the current BEP funding formula. The current BEP funding formula will remain in place until a new funding formula is recommended to and approved by the Tennessee General Assembly. The public is encouraged to submit comments in writing to ensure that all communications are thoroughly documented and can be reviewed and considered in the future. Public comment is encouraged to focus on developing a new funding formula rather than revising the current funding formula. Consider what should be funded in a new funding formula and at what level. Subcommittees will be responsible for reviewing public comment and making recommendations for what should be included in a new funding formula. While all committees, subcommittees, and members of the public should feel free to communicate openly, documents and records may be subject to public inspection pursuant to the Tennessee Public Records Act and may be publicly posted or otherwise made available. All recommendations that are submitted by committees and subcommittees will be reviewed and considered, but not all recommendations will ultimately be included in the proposed new funding formula. All right, Janet, I'm going to pass it on over to you to first elect a vice chair and then dig in.
Okay. Normally we've kind of pre-discussed this, but does anybody just want to volunteer, or do you want to be, I'm an East Tennessee girl, Jerry. I mean, there's also railroading that happens in Upper East Tennessee sometimes, just saying.
Feel free to nominate.
Okay. Anybody have any suggestions? You want me to start some? Everybody on here could be a very capable vice chair. I've got Sean and Jerry I'm looking at just because who I can see. Norma, does anybody just want to just say I'm raring to go as vice chair? Can I just ask somebody? Hey, Sean, could you be the vice chair?
I was going to make that nomination. I nominate Sean Kimball. You'll get me back when I'm nominating him.
Well,
Yes.
someone just nominated Jerry first, though. Did you see that in the chat?
Oh,
Whatever the group decides, I'm fine with. But there's people that are a lot more capable than I am, I'm sure.
I second the nomination and say let's stop talking about it and move on.
okay. We've got Sean in a motion and we've got a second. All those in favor say aye. Okay. Well, Jerry, these East Tennessee people figured out how to get West Tennessee railroaded in. So thanks, guys. Thank you, Sean. I think you'll be a great vice chair. Thank you. Okay, Jamie, I think we're done with the housekeeping. Just things from the departments to remember to review the PowerPoint deck that is sent in advance and to engage with our stakeholder communities. I want to go back to that because it's something I mentioned to Jamie. I know that we strongly talked about at our last committee that we would really like to survey our directors of schools and our county mayors. Jamie, do you care to drop into the chat and email? Just I sent a rough draft to Jamie because I'm still trying to learn. Is it something supposed to come to the department, or what? Can we all drop stuff in and start accumulating things? And I think we can just start accumulating the things and getting them sent. Do you care to send that in the chat and email to everybody right now? Because if we're going to do a survey, which I think we all agreed was a great tool, one of many, I'm seeing some nods. Are we as convinced this meeting as we were? Great. I'm seeing a thumbs up from Norma. If you can help me technically, Jamie, get that sent to everybody. It says there are no limitations who we can talk to or how long. So I think we've got a green light to start engaging and talking and start sending in information to each other so that we can have robust conversations and recommendations. Okay, next slide. Sorry, I'm not very good at talking and knowing how to attach a file. I'll get better. I think this just piggybacks, this slide just piggybacks off of what we just said, that each one of you brings valuable expertise, and it's important. Everybody's here for a reason. It's important that we tap into the deep bench of what's on this committee and the resources and the networks that you have, so that we really can be a very unified, strong voice that's gone deep and wide in these rural spaces, because Tennessee is very rural, and this is a small group with a limited amount of time. And I feel very strongly, and I know this group does, that we want to serve them very well. So as many viewpoints as we can get is important. So it says the process is that I will facilitate, and in my absence, Sean, it will be you, to have initial discussion and brainstorm based on our experiences and expertise. Make sure every resource is listed, and we start really categorizing these things as we must have, would like to have, should have, long shot, as Jamie pointed out. I know we had some robust conversation and 2 things bubbled up. I want to, Jamie, I think this is a question for you that I had sent in an email to as a follow-up from our group last time. I'd love to know, for the sake of the group, we had talked about 3 to 5 examples of state funding, rural specific, that not only was well funded, but was achieving strong academic results. Is that something the department can provide to us? Because that was my understanding. Or, I mean, I would think this group is happy to start gathering resources to share with each other too. Just want to make sure that we don't lose this opportunity and momentum since we're meeting. So is that something the department can provide us? And
so I do know it's definitely been topic of conversation as far as even just the general public being really interested in what other states are doing and who's doing it really well. And the commissioners even listed off a few of those states. As far as an official department resource for subcommittee use, I will check on that for you. But I think it also would behoove the group to start doing some investigation of your own. I know other committees have started the same thing. They're out there digging and starting to share as a collective and really, form some good resources on their own. And it's probably a really good timely way to deal with it too. Get it in your hands as soon as you can.
Okay. And I was just looking at the chat. So I'm going to, Sean, if you don't mind, I'm going to read this because I think that ties into what we just heard. And I want to make sure that I'm getting this subcommittee well resourced. I know everybody can see it, but I think it would help to say, because a few questions for the record. What assurances do we have that executive leadership at TDOE is hearing our thoughts, concerns, and ideas? No, it's impossible for the department's executive leadership to attend all meetings, but maybe to have more than a facilitator to engage in conversations and answer questions. Should we expect to be given materials and research that we request prior to the meeting? And then this one, I don't know that segues, but I think it's a potentially hearsay, but has it been noted that legislators have been told that a new draft funding model already exists? Is this true? But what I just heard from you, Jamie, is that this group can start resourcing and bringing stuff to the group. I am certainly happy as chair to start trying to gather some of that information. It was probably a little unclear in that first committee that I thought those things needed to be driven through the department, but based on this second meeting, it sounds like we all need to start bringing our individual talents and resources to the table. So as your chair, I will have more clarity around that. I will be happy to step up my side and make sure we start getting resources shared to everyone. I think this might be a department question though I would assume the answer is no, that there's already a funding model that exists, but I probably just needed to say that.
Yep. You're right. So this is an opportunity to start afresh. And actually it's really interesting. Much of the conversation has been around, what if I don't know an awful lot about the current BEP formula? And the answer has been the less you know, likely the better, because then you're not constrained by, current perceptions. So this is an opportunity to lay it out there exactly what you feel and deeply believe as a team should be part of a new funding formula.
Okay.
Can I just comment one thing real quickly? I understand that technically Tennessee doesn't have a new funding model. That's what we're supposed to be doing. I just felt like I needed this conversation that circulated that about a draft already existing, and I just felt like for the record we needed to know if that was true or not. But I do want to go back to something that Ms. Ayers said, because it wasn't that. And maybe it was just the two of us. We left the meeting after having conversation with our facilitator from last meeting, who was unable to join us until later in the meeting. that would be a deliverable that the department would do for us. And that was my understanding. And so, you know, if that's what we need to do in moving forward, and again, you know, no slight to our current facilitator, but if we have a different facilitator every meeting, then we're going to continue to have these problems. And so anyway, I just wanted to know if when we have questions or we need information from the department, will we be able to get that?
Absolutely. And I'll be the first one to tell you my apologies, sincerest apologies, that I was not with you last time, but it's me for the duration. So you're gonna have me, call me, email me, whatever you need to do, surface it through Janet. If you have questions, and I'll do my best to get you answers. As far as materials, so typically the schedule for most groups, it was laid out on week, off week, on week, off week. And your off week is the week that you actually get your batch of materials, the beginning of the week, like Monday of that week. And you have that full off week to really review that batch of data and then do your research, collect any of the resources you need as a team. However, there have been a couple of subcommittees that actually have had, and you being one of them, 2 on weeks back to back, which then means that there wasn't that batch of data in between your meetings. And so that's one of the resources you will receive as a subcommittee, and it will really drive so much of what you discuss. Because what ends up happening, all that feedback that's happening out there through town halls, through superintendent study councils, all that kind of stuff, all that stuff is coming in, and then it goes through a filter. The paralegals are filtering that. And then if you think about a qualitative research study, they're coding it, they're sorting it per subcommittee. This feedback needs to go to this subcommittee. This feedback goes to this subcommittee. That's the batch of data through this specific lens, through rural and small district lens. That's the batch of data you get. So that's one big resource you'll have that you do not have this week. And I wish you had it in your hands. Secondly, you know, as a committee, you all be doing, you're charged with really trying to not only think about what goes in that funding formula, but is there stuff that you need to collect along the way? Don't hesitate to ask if it's already available through the department. And if it is, of course, it absolutely could be in your hands in no time. So the materials for the meeting, the PowerPoint, the one that Janet's going through, there's no content really in the PowerPoint. It's just as you can see, it's kind of reminders. It's some front matter, a little bit of reminder on the end of the next meeting, but it's really a guiding question in the middle to shape how this committee kind of engages in this meeting. So it will be kind of specific to what you're doing. It's the how, the what you're doing is that slide. So feel free to look at it ahead of time. So it should be in the Google Drive days before. And hopefully if I can get some downtime here in just a little bit this evening, I'll be able to put even more in ahead of time. So you'll have that, and you'll have the agenda, and then you will have a batch of materials, but you don't have it for this time. So yes, the answer to that question, that was a long way to answer. You will have materials prior to the meeting much sooner than you did today. This one just happens to be a back-to-back week, which is not ideal, but you're going to do a great job today. Other committees have done a great job as well. Did that answer your question, Sean?
Sure. Thank you.
So where we are I'm seeing some really good information coming up in the chat. Alan, I think you're working, and you had listed something that you're doing in Texas. And Eddie, I think you have a great question. And Jamie, this will be a question for the department, because this may be something the department can do that we don't have access to. Since we get a funding sheet that breaks down how our funding works, I wonder if the department has connections with states, can get those funding sheets, spreadsheets to help guide our discussion. I always like being able to teach by exemplars, and it does speed up the process. I mean, when you get to the nuts and bolts, because that goes to the transparency piece as well. But, because Sean and, I mean, I saw you're nodding, and I think I saw Norma nodding, and maybe even Jerry. I think we did leave with the understanding from our last committee that we would have something from the department about the 3 to 5 examples and maybe some feedback on the survey. Even while y'all were talking, I was trying to figure out how to attach just a draft information to maybe collect on the survey. I'm sorry, I just can't do it. I am going to have to depend on you, Jamie, to do that. It's just, I'm not good at attaching things. I can do after the fact, but not during when I'm trying to talk. But
So it will not attach to the
chat,
chat, but I did email it to the group.
great. So you should have something, because maybe that way we'll have each other's emails and we can follow up. At this point in time on discussion, we've spent 30 minutes on just having to read the technical stuff and going through the process. I'd really like to take the rest of our time about what idea sharing and things we need in order to make informed decisions. I think the group feels pretty strong about the surveys. So Jamie, how do we do that? Do we do our own survey? Is that something that the department does?
I think that's a great question. I'll definitely surface that one right now as you all get digging in and see if I can get us an answer pretty soon while we're still on.
Because, you know, in order for a survey to, I mean, it can be informal, but we still need to be able to get it, calculate it, tally it.
Sure.
And I don't mind to take that on, but coming from the department may be more leverage. And then I think from our other meeting, the 3 to 5 examples from other states, maybe we can get something from Texas, what you're doing. Alan, I mean, Jamie, I think you mentioned from the department that other subcommittees were asking for material too of other states. Is that something you have already collected?
That is not something that is not something that I have in my hands as a, you know,
Okay.
as, you know, senior leadership at the department. That at our level, we do not have that. But I definitely think that it's something that exists somewhere, shape or form. Let me just find out. I'll shoot it up the flagpole right now.
Okay, I'll let you do that. But in the meantime, as your all's chair, from this committee to that one, I want to make sure we have these. We've already identified 2 resources we think that will help us make a decision. I'm willing to take a stab at trying to get information out to the group about, let's get the survey process up and going of county mayors and directors of schools for all of our rural districts, and some 3 to 5 examples that have good outcomes. What other tools do you think we need so we can start actually getting our heads around what those recommendations may be? I see, Christy, that you've added some in the chat too, along those same lines. I mean, I'm hearing a common theme about we're really wanting the information about what other states have done really well.
The list that I've added there are the things that on a comparison from the states of what's very common to be included in those, in the base amount, or how that's calculated per student, and that looks fairly. The list that I have there, which is in the a base amount, additional amounts for special education, ELL, economically disadvantaged, and then several states do rural or small school allotments. And I didn't see an infrastructure allotment listed on the 50 state comparison that I looked at, but I think that's a challenge for small and rural districts. Sometimes we don't have the local funding to do the updates and things we need. So that was one that I had just added. But all of those except that one are the ones that are typically included in what I'm seeing in the foundational or student-centered funding models, that just from some research that I've done.
Thank you.
I just wanted to maybe have a starting point that maybe those are must-haves. I don't know. Maybe we're not to that point. Maybe we need to get the survey out and see if everybody else thinks that's must-haves. But that seems to be something that most other states have already done.
That's very valuable. Jamie,
Christy,
another housekeeping question. Will you capture this chat stuff too so it can get communicated to the group?
Yep, that's what I'm doing.
I thought it might be. Otherwise, I was going to be rude and take a screenshot of things. It shows you how technologically backwards
No
I am.
need, no need.
Christy, I think that really aligns too with what we heard from the commissioner when we were in Murfreesboro that day.
Yes.
That we need to be thinking toward a base with pieces added on top of it. So I don't know what all those other pieces should be or what the opportunities are. And Alan works with rural districts across the nation. Do you have any input there, Alan, on other than Texas? I'm putting you on the spot, I know, buddy. But who do you hear from out there in the nation that says, hey, our funding model works, versus who do you hear from and say it's broken?
No one's going to say their funding model works. I'm just being honest with you, because Texas has got a pretty good situation. I think the question, are we looking at, a student or a small rural district multiplier in some form or fashion? And if that's the case, then that needs to be on the table, as we have to have that moving forward. But to put that on the table, to me, this is just me, I'm not adding extra work. We don't have a definition of what a rural and small school is in the state of Tennessee. And I know that you think, well, it's easy to tell. It's not, because you got districts that are kind of what I call them rural suburban, that think they're really not rural, but they are. And why that's important in this funding is you're looking at down the road where grants and other opportunities could come out of this work that could be connected to this as well. So Colorado is one of the few that has a definition and has a number cutoff. That may be part of this as we move forward. Definitely could get with the Colorado folks and their rural office, their rural outreach from their Department of Ed. It's Danielle LaPlatte, but she's going to a BOCES, but I could get information from her pretty quickly, and then her replacement would be able to help us as well. I'll tell you states we don't need to look through.
That's helpful.
California, Illinois, and New York, we need to stay the heck away from them. And I'm just being honest with you, it's not a good, number one, Illinois, they went 600 something days without even having a budget passed. So we don't want to deal with them, period. If you're looking at liked areas, Texas is non-comparable in a lot of ways, because there's 900 districts that can classify as rural and small. Idaho's another state that's kind of going through some of this work, and we do a lot up there in Idaho as well. Not the same size, but there are some comparisons. So Norma, I don't know if I answered your question, but I can find information. You just got to let me know what to pull and what we need to find. And then looking at, do we want to add in there that we're going to define some things and allow that to make it easier? Because I think our voice in our county mayors and our director of schools having a say into what definition and the process moving forward is a big part of this. And I don't want legislators to have a big part of the naming or that process as well. So I'm not trying to be negative, just being honest.
Alan, I was hearing that when we had like our committee chair call a few days ago, one of the states that the commissioner mentioned that might be a light comparison is Indiana. Do you know anything about Indiana and what's happening there?
Yeah, I was just with them last week. We did our conference there in Indianapolis, and their commissioner of ed. So I can get some information. Our state affiliate in Indiana Small Rural Schools, we can get a lot of information. I'm gonna be honest with you though, there's no funding formula. It's like, picking out someone to marry your daughter. None of them are going to be perfect and right. So I think this is the same situation. So yeah, whatever you want.
Well,
you
I'm
shoot
going to
me
look at
emails.
this more like a prearranged marriage. If I could prearrange a marriage, what am I looking for?
Yeah, and I would think you need about 40 or 50 acres to go with it, Janet.
Okay.
If you're going to prearrange it.
Yeah.
Yeah. We just let me know what you want out of Indiana. Chris
Okay.
Lagoni's our guy there, and I can get the information.
Alan, if you don't care to check into that, and I'll do some checking around too. I mean, this whole group, I think Christy, you had some great points. And I think we do need to start gelling these down of the things that we must have, should have, nice to have, long shot. But I think our must have would have to be something that gives us a formula that I think we capture the essence of whatever we defined as rural and small district.
Yeah.
I think should have might be the things that we start talking about that need to be baked in, that are the wraparound services like mental health and counseling for what happens after high school and how we get them back. Nice to have and long shots. I guess I feel like in these rural communities, it's kind of like the hierarchy of needs. You know, we got to be able to eat first. So I don't know if I've gotten to nice to have or long shot in my thinking. You all may have, but I'm still just trying to eat and layer on.
I think that some of the things that could be, I guess, should have, you know, some of the things that we do get that are not in our funding formula, but are typically recurring funds that we get and expect at this point from the state, to make sure that, you know, there's something in there that I know that we're getting, you know, safety money, and coordinated school health helps with some of those wraparound needs that we talk about, the SRO grants that we get to add those to our district, and the Family Resource Center money. So those are some of those that are recurring that are not really in our funding formula, but, you know, we expect to have them in the last several years. And then I think something else maybe nice to have or should have possibly is, you know, something in there for the high school level, or even maybe lower than that, with to expand the CTE and the expenses associated with dual enrollment, and those type things for those students. And then I have a lot to add to this, I guess, but also the networks or programming that helps rural places in particular attract teachers in the first place, so not going to our neighboring counties, and also building the capacity of leadership within our own. I think that what I just said there is a big challenge, in particular to rural and smaller districts.
But Christy, I think you're making some great points. So let's talk, I mean, let's just kind of brainstorm and keep building on what everybody's saying. Like a should have, must have because of that talent pipeline. Maybe we want to throw into the mix in the conversation, because we're trying to build this of, you know, if we could start from scratch, you know, medical programs, a lot of programs have built in underserved areas that there's a stipend added on top for rural areas. I don't know why we can't start having those conversations about BEP for these underserved areas, that there's something built in for high needs, high risk areas, being able to recruit that talent in. So
Janet, I've got a question. When we think about, you know, we're talking about must-haves, you know, and when I think about must-haves, those are the things that are in that base student amount. So, you know, we can't forget that every school, you know, needs a principal. We need secretaries, you need cafeteria. All of those things should be in our must-haves. And then when I start thinking about should-haves, you know, we get into that, you know, what are some of those things, like maybe in the lower elementary? Do we need some additional aides? Do we need more funding there for the, you know, so we can have smaller class sizes, so we can do more small group stuff? And like Christy said in the high school about our CTE, you know, there's never, for us to keep up with equipment and to make sure our students are trained to go into the workforce. If we don't develop partnerships with our local businesses and factories, then we won't be able to, you know, we can't teach them how to do machining on a something that's 40 years old, you know, and go into the workforce and do that.
I just add that I couldn't agree with what everyone said so far about the must-have, and especially what Eddie just said. The must-have it goes back to the word that I used last meeting is adequacy, because BEP, the reason we're having this conversation is because the BEP is not adequate. And so must-haves are fully funding what schools need to operate. And again, I give the example, we have a middle school with grades 6 through 8. with 700 kids, and the BEP currently funds one principal and a half-time assistant principal for that building. There's not a school district on the planet that can adequately serve their students and all their needs and teacher evaluations and duties and making sure we have a quality educational program for students with that level of funding. So a must-have is an adequate level of funding beyond what the BEP currently funds. And I think most of the things for us in rural districts are must-have, because I think when you look, however you define rural, we're a distressed county. We don't have a large population. I mean, and so I would say that we would qualify in that rural category, but should have and nice to have in many districts look different. For us, we should have access to things that we don't have that would fall into that must-have category. So again, I just think that we need to be very adamant that whatever, if there's a rural multiplier or there's additional funding for students, title students and students with IEPs and at-risk students or whatever it looks like, that we put as much into that must-have category as we can, because that's what's going to drive serving students for us.
I agree. Sean, I want to piggyback on what you just said on that, because I think that one of the things I wrote down in my own personal notes is how can sparsity or rurality weight based on the number of students served across a geographical area, because to more accurately reflect the higher costs and needs of our rural communities. I mean, I think that's exactly what you're saying, is this geography and that span, you don't have those economies of scales, is part of your base and your must-have, that scarcity that's just automatically baked in with the other things layered on. To Christy's point about all those other things and your point and the things that I'm hearing from everyone, but maybe somehow we capture that, because that spread out geography, sparsity does play a part in this. Ask anybody that's trying to make sure that it doesn't matter how much money you throw at broadband, sparsity is kind of what drives the day, because you don't have enough people per mile for the providers to want to do it. So it does make a difference when you're spread out.
Let me just add one other thing. I don't know if this makes sense, but many of the folks that deal with in rural communities, we hear the department and we hear others say all the time, well, get some help or hire the help or do this. We have to manufacture the resources in rural districts. We can't just go out. We don't have the resources in our community to hire consultants or to partner with this organization to come in to do this great work. True rural districts that have less resources have to manufacture that support for kids, and that costs, and it's difficult.
Can I piggyback on that a little bit too, guys? Everything fantastic what I've heard in relationship to Cannon County, but as the director of Cannon County Schools, Freddie Curtis is saying to all of you, Sean, and I currently agree. I've got supervisors, and I could probably get an amen from everybody here. I've got supervisors that are doing multiple jobs. So in my neighboring county, I hate to do Rutherford, but it's my neighbor to the west. They've got a pure transportation director. Well, my transportation director is not only transportation, but does her after-school program and also does and also is our data person. So, I got people that in these small and rural districts are doing multiple jobs, whereas we're going to have some help, and that needs to be factored in at some point. Not only the sparsity and the geographic factor or place-based factor, you're going to have to do that, but also in the amount of as more things are added on from the State Department of Education, then we have to figure, okay, how many more hats are we going to have to wear until we get too many hats and we're drowning, or the job's not getting done. So that's my face here. But what Christy has said and what Eddie said last time on infrastructure, I think is critical, and whether that needs to be, we have to realize too, and I think Sean, you elaborated on this, is that, come on guys, we know the real reason of the BEP in the first place when it happened 30 years ago was because small schools were getting the short end. And that's why the suit came up in originally. So, to me, we're going to have to talk about that factor as well as others. But sparsity, I think, is a good point of having some sort of factor that because you are rural, then you get that. In fact, Sean, I've been classified in some. One of the reasons we weren't classified as financially distressed is that we were called urban fringe. Now, I'll just tell you, Cannon County, if you've ever been here, is not anything urban anywhere. Let me take you to Short Mountain or Wilmouth Creek or some places there, and I'll tell you that it's not anywhere near urban, but because we were so near Murfreesboro and Nashville, we're saying that we were on the urban fringe. Well, we're not fringe. We're about as rural as can be. So I think whatever we look at, rural is the key. We are rural, we're small, and we need more help than some of our friends in neighboring counties. Enough preaching. So thank y'all.
I think these
Janet, if I could add on here something that Sean and Christy both brought up that has gotten a bad rap in the legislature, in other circles, is we are too top heavy in administration. Mm-hmm. That we have too many principals or assistant principals. And I don't believe that the folks who are saying that understand that every teacher in every school building has to be evaluated at least twice a year. My principals are drowning trying to evaluate all of the teachers to follow the law that's been put into place and do a really good job of it, because it's one of the most important things that we do every day is to evaluate our teachers and give high quality instructional feedback. We can't make our teachers better if we don't know it ourselves. But at the same time, we're not being funded for anybody else to help in this realm. And I don't want us to think we may have a little bit of a fight on our hands about administrative and central office, but like Freddie was saying, I've got 1,700 students and I have 3 supervisors. I mean, as far as instructionally, everybody wears so many hats in a rural district, and my folks don't mind, but at some point you get spread so thin that you're not good at anything. Because there's a new initiative every other.
And Norma, I think there's a way we can quantify that.
Yes.
Because there is a span of control and, good business management practices that exist that talk about that span and the number of people you should be supervising and some things. So there are some things, instead of just us trying to figure it out, I think there's an opportunity here that when we're imagining and we're forgetting what we've had in the past, other than the pressure points that we're feeling of what got us here, so that if we could just, if you were king, queen for the day, what would you do for your district so you could do that? I think that span of control, I'm hearing loud and clear from everyone, is the multiple hats. And I think if you take us out as education, but I think in the business world, whether you're education, healthcare, manufacturing, whatever you're in, there is those that everybody's span is different, but there are some really good outliers in there. So I think that might be another resource that we can pull in when we're looking at our must-haves. What I'm hearing in must-haves is like the base and the funding, that what you need is adequate funding as a district to where, and then when I picked up for Christy when I was writing my notes, was it's not just adequate funding, but things that are, that get added on that are not considered reoccurring, but they are reoccurring. I think the non-reoccurring that are really reoccurring needs to just be called what it is. It's like if you have a lot in your miscellaneous in your budget and it's the same thing over and over again, you need a budget line for it. So I think that maybe when I'm hearing this must-have in the base, something's built into that base when you're figuring out what are the needs, so that Sean doesn't have 1.5 people for a school of 700. What is that span of control? What is there some outside benchmark of knowing when somebody's wearing too many hats that they're not doing a good job. Because what it's my understanding when we gel this down to the must-have, should-haves, and all of those, that we're also going to and have a formal recommendation. And I know it'll come to me, but I'm not sending anything up till we all as a group are 100% comfortable with it. We've got to have a cost associated with it. If we're saying our must-have is this, we'll have done our homework enough to where we say we must have this, and this is what that looks like. It might be, you know, I don't know. I'm not even gonna throw a number out there because I don't want a number recorded because it might be high, it might be low. We need to do the homework.
One other factor that I thought of too, like if you ask Freddie this, it's not equitable when you look at where our counties sit next to, you know, you mentioned you're this urban fringe. You're competing with teachers with districts that have resources way beyond what you have in Cannon County. And is there a way for us in some kind of way to make that playing field more level for rural or, you know, at risk or distressed counties or just rural counties in general? But I think that's something we have to talk about too, is how do we compete for the best administrators and the best teachers, especially with the teacher shortage that we're dealing with now across Tennessee.
I agree, Sean, and that's one thing I was going to bring up too, is on the definition. The definition I think is going to be very important, that what is defined as rural schools, because there are rural places in Rutherford County, don't get me wrong. However, I'm competing against to get those just like you are, to get those good quality educators. In fact, I've gotten more recently from Tennessee Tech than I did from Middle Tennessee State University, and MTSU is 20 minutes from me. So, but I've gotten more from that side than I have the other side. So it's very hard for me to compete at, you know, $38,000 in comparison to when Rutherford's spending, you know, that you're getting 45, 46 or close to 50. It's just hard. And then keeping our educators here when they get, you know, 5 or 6 years ahead, and then they turn right around and leave me. Because they're going for the money, and I don't blame them, you know, on that part. But, you know, we've got to have, but that definition, I think that Alan and Chrissy had talked about, that's going to be key to this, I think, this bill, Chairman Harris. So thank you.
I think these are great points, and I want to be mindful of your time, but that also reminds me, because what I'm hearing is we're starting to gel into must-have, should-haves. Christy, I saw your note about maybe a should-have would be pre-K, since there's built into that funding formula, because we really don't have that built in now. I think we can start putting these into categories of must-have, should-have. But I think there's a lot of material that we're going to need to share with each other between now and our next meeting, which is December the 9th at 11:30. How do you all feel about extending that meeting to a little longer? An hour doesn't feel adequate to me. I may be the only one feeling the pressure of trying to get a lot in an hour, especially when we have to read housekeeping things at the beginning and part of that hour.
I would agree. I would agree with that. I can, you know, this is really important to us. And I think one of the things we don't want to do is to, you know, I'm concerned about this process because we do the must have, should have. If we miss something, you know, can someone come back and say, oh, well, you didn't put that in there. So we have to be very thoughtful, and we may need to be broad on some of the things we put in there too, you know, not just all specifics. And let me just throw this out and say this real quickly. Is there any plans to do any kind of working documents? Because if not, I could put together and share out with the group some Google Docs that have these categories that we all can go in and just kind of keep a running document to capture our thoughts on the must-haves and should-haves, and maybe
Sean,
put
if you could do that, our newly elected vice chair, I think that would be very helpful, because that gives us a place to start doing the things like the survey and fleshing it out, and to decide, is that a department thing, or we're going to say grace over it, endorse it, and figuring out, you know, I'm willing to spend resources for this group to get somebody to help us with the survey, for instance, because that's not a small task and I want it to be well done. but I think we all felt like it needed to be done. So let's get that, because a lot of what we're talking about capturing, I'd like to get that out there in that Google Doc. I think the things that are happening in other states, I'll add my input, but Alan's got some things, Christy's got that, Norma, everybody on this committee's really got some valuable things. So Sean, if you could get that started and maybe even just take it and send it straight to our emails. I'm speaking for me. That would be helpful. If you could just start creating that and get that started. So I'm not having to dig through multiple layers, that I can just see it and mark it. And I've just got this folder that this is what it is.
Yes, ma'am. I'll set up a shared drive, and you all feel like if there are any supporting documents, PDFs or anything that you all want to drop in there, just drop it in there. And we'll just kind of have a working folder and some working files. I see the department, Jamie, you just sent us a sample survey. So we'll put that out there with the understanding that you all can add, subtract, take away to that survey. And then maybe by the next time we meet, or even before then, we can finalize that survey to send out as well.
That would be, Sean, thank you for volunteering to that. I think that would be very helpful. How do you all feel about, because it's right now at 12:30, how do you feel about our December 9th meeting, our next meeting? It's supposed to be 11:30 to 12:30. How are you all with 11:30 to 1? Which would be?
I'm good.
Yep. I make a motion that we go from 11:30 to 1 Central.
Okay. I have a motion. Do I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
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 I could have asked for discussion. Sorry, I didn't follow Robert's rules, but I think everybody's all in favor. And that's just an extra 30 minutes. But if we have this document floating around and we're actually getting some material between now and then, we can see if the next meeting we need to even make it a little longer, but I think we're at least headed in the direct direction. We have some clarity around that we need to roll up our sleeves and start bringing some resources to this committee.
And just for last comment, I had made a lot. Great, everybody's on point. Sean, your comment and iteration and reiteration of adequacies, it resonates loudly. What I'm hearing in must-have is really what we're looking for is a broad idea, is that if we go with the base allocation, to start what might then add weighted, a formula with weights, we want to make sure that base is adequate.
Yep.
And we also want to make sure that the conversation stays focused on a funding formula and not a spending plan.
Thank you, Jerry, for that exclamation point. That is a great one. It is. Yes, thank you. We are here to focus on student by student. So
Jana, as you all wrap up, I do have at least an answer to one question. I'm still waiting on the other one. So this one is around other states and their models. So the commissioner anticipates by the end of the month, we will have some comparing and contrasting of 6 to 8 states and their models. And she will present that out. And they are still working on, as far as the survey goes, whether or not that needs to go through any other communication pipelines prior to deployment, but hopefully I'll have an answer to that one soon. I did drop in the chat possible halves, and of course these aren't must, should, could, or anything yet. They're just a big dump of ideas. It looks dark to me on my side in the chat. Does it to you all as well? Can you all see it?
I'm looking.
Let's see if I try to send it again.
No.
I don't see it, Jamie. I'm
You don't see it? Okay.
scrolling through all of the chat.
Yeah, it just showed up. Yeah, you can see the script.
You can't
There.
see it? Okay.
I can see the
Then-
bullet, but nothing else.
Okay. So I'm going to go ahead and share my screen. So normally what would happen is we would actually have, I'm going to show you the document. Up here, there would be, you're going to be sorting into must, shoulds, nice, and long shot. And so as those are captured, you all sort, I type these in. I will read them out, or probably do what I'm doing right now, share the screen. And then you all say yes, no, move this one here or there, all that kind of stuff. until we get it the way we want to before Janet approves it, and then we send it on. So for today, I've just been capturing down in here in some notes. So I'll make it just a little bit bigger. I don't know about you all, but getting older, need bigger print. So possible halves. Take just a second to read over that list and see if there's anything that I've left off or it needs any more context.
Is this the should have?
This was, well, there were a couple different ones. So I heard some shoulds, some musts, and then,
Okay.
well, I don't know if this goes in a should or a must, but so it was just an initial drop list that could get sorted.
Jamie, would you mind sharing that document with me when we're finished, just so that if we're going to set up some files to work from, we can already include the information for today?
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Yeah, I was going to ask. So the things that we're capturing from chat, can that get communicated to Sean too?
Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Anything else from the group? I think we have some clarity and some direction. I think we've got some work to do, but I love this group and the energy that we have. I think we're going to
I
get
just
some
want to
good
clarify that
information.
Sean's going to have the Dropbox that is shared with us that we can all drop things in. Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
I have a list of the base amounts from other states that I'll add. I think it's lacking a lot of context, but it's from 2,000, 775,000 in a hybrid model in Georgia to, 13 something in DC. But like I said, it lacks a lot of context, but I'll put some things in there that I've worked on.
Thank you, Christy. That's great. Anything else before we conclude?
Just last thing, so everyone knows when to look for it. I'll try to get to this afternoon. If not, before lunch tomorrow, I'll have this posted. You may see the drive or the shared folder posted first without all the materials, but I'll just be adding things to that. And once we get the drive set up, you guys can start adding to it too. But this afternoon, in the morning, you should start seeing something.
Yeah, I can tell you're rural. You're wearing many hats, but thank you, Sean.
That's what we got to do, all of us. So thank you.
Jamie, have I missed anything?
No, not a thing.
Okay.
It's fantastic.
Thanks, guys. Great discussion.
Yep.
Great group. I'm looking forward to what we come up with.
Yep. Thank you all very much. Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Happy Thanksgiving.
Bye, y'all.